I try to be evolving, and so that my children will eventually break that cycle. They will be the generation that breaks that cycle. So to me, that is so critical because we don't talk about this stuff. Like in my mom's generation and her friends, they don't talk about the pain that they go through of general life and what the expectations of society are on them and what they have to live up to, and they don't realize how important it is to be vulnerable and to talk and to be open.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Welcome to today's episode of Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between. Today, I have the honor to interview my friend, Valerie Gershenhorn, and she will be sharing a little bit about her journey of grief and also of the gratitude that came in that process. Valerie, welcome to today's episode.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here, Kendra.
I am so grateful that you are and that you accepted this invitation to hop on and be able to share your journey, my friend. I know a little bit about your journey of grief, and I think that it's a very inspiring story, and I'd love the listeners to listen in as well. First off, tell me a little bit, or tell the listeners a little bit about yourself.
So I am 47 years old. I have an incredible husband and three beautiful daughters. And I am a dermatologist. And I really, more than just dermatology, have an incredible passion for health and wellness. It has really become the path and purpose that drives me every day. And a lot of it is from losing my mom, as we'll discuss in a moment. So, really, for me, making an impact on people to know the power of their own bodies and mind in their health journeys and not to rely so much on pharmaceuticals or things outside or external to themselves, to really believe in the power that we all were born with. That is really my journey right now and what I'm striving to teach others as well. And, mostly starting with myself, of course, because that's where all learning comes from. And then my daughters, and now more so than ever, my husband, who's learning that with me. And then hopefully as many people as I can cause a ripple effect for.
That's beautiful. And that is actually how Val and I met, was through a health and wellness company that we're both a part of. And it has been amazing because we met that way, yet we ended up finding out we had so many other levels of our life that were in common and have bonded in many different levels.
Oh
So
yes,
I'm so grateful.
I'm so grateful for our friendship too, Kendra. It was
I,
such a pleasant surprise of this beautiful journey as well.
Oh, well, I am grateful that you're in my life, my dear.
Mhm.
So now you spoke a little bit then. So you mentioned about your mom. So let's go ahead and go. It's kind of like you take the band aid right off, like in this conversation, since we go straight basically to the point here, and tell us a little bit about that experience of your mom passing.
So my mom was an incredible woman. She was an OBGYN, and so she worked really hard at her job. And ironically, she herself found at the age of 35 a lump in her breast, ended up being breast cancer. And for about 10 years, she on and off fought it like a champion. So at that age of 12, for me, was a really huge inflection point. My whole world kind of turned upside down. And she was really the center of my universe. She was everything to me. And so I just watched her in that journey. And I really, at that age, didn't know how to cope. I didn't know about coping mechanisms or things that I'm learning now as an adult with mindset. And she really fought hard, but unfortunately, at the age of 45, she did not uh, wasn't able to fight any longer. So she had
Mm.
passed, and I was about 22 years old at that point. I entered med school, and I knew that I really wanted to be a healer, but I just didn't know the path. I was still struggling with my own demons about the grief process. And I'm still going through it. There's really never an after or a finish line, but I do
Yes.
know that what she went through and what it taught me is really the catalyst for me trying to be the best version of myself. And
Wow.
so, yeah, it was quite a journey for me.
So let's talk a little bit about that journey. So you were 12 when she uh, was diagnosed or found her own breast, lump,
Yes.
and the lump in her breast. And then did she go through chemo? Did she do all those routes? What did she do for the 10 years that she was in that process of her illness?
Yeah, so at the time when she was diagnosed, it was very big to do just lumpectomies. So she did that. Just a portion where the tumor was removed, and she didn't at that initial episode. I believe it was so long ago, and when you go through those
Mm.
things, you block things out. But she didn't have chemo or radiation at that time, so she just had the surgery to remove the lump, and then 5 years went by, and those 5 years were still hard. I would definitely see and feel the sadness that she had. I always
Mm.
felt that she kind of was waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. And then after the first 5 years, she developed, I believe it was a spread to the other breast. So at that point, she had had a bilateral double mastectomy, and went through chemo, which was torturous, and everything that goes with that, losing the hair and her breasts. And as women, unfortunately, in society, we are forced, I believe, to look at our external part of ourselves as what defines us sometimes. I don't think it's
Mm.
a blanket statement. I think for a lot of women, it holds true to some degree. And losing the things that identify us as women, our breasts and our hair, being like, I think, the number one and two, really can be traumatic. So I watched her go through that, and she got a wig, and she continued to work through all of it,
I was going to
which,
ask you that. I
oh my
was
gosh,
I
yeah,
was
which
one,
was
yeah, I can.
amazing.
That just shows right there uh, the type of woman that she was. And in a little bit I want to actually go back a little bit to her history as well. But you were at this moment, then you were about 17. You were in high
Yeah, I
school when
started.
she was her second,
No,
or
I was
yeah, when
actually,
she started chemo.
yeah, I was actually a second semester freshman in college. And
Oh, already. Okay, wow.
what's so interesting is my mom really wanted me to be independent and kind of go to a college a little bit farther away from home to not
Hmm.
feel so sheltered. And I was very adamant about staying close. And so I got into NYU. I got a partial academic scholarship, and I lived in the city, and I was really happy that I did make that decision, even though that's not what she wanted. And I believe she was happy in the end, because she was diagnosed again in my second semester of my freshman year. So I was able to kind of go with her to chemo and to be able to come home when I needed to and when she needed it. But I will tell you something interesting with my mom, and through the very end, so the last day, she never was giving full disclosure of her illness to protect myself
Mm.
and my brother, who was 6 years younger. So she always kind of hid the truth about how it was. And I always knew, I think, so I always found out the real deal. But I know that she did it because she loved us. But at that time, I was going through so much of my grief that I was upset that she wouldn't tell me the full story.
Mm.
But now, being a mom, I totally get
You
why.
understand. Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, yeah, so I was able to be there for her, more than if I had gone away to Rochester, which was another college that I would gotten into, because I grew up in Long Island. And so it was a really hard time for me navigating, like, being out on my own in college, trying to carry this scholarship, and then having to process this all. And I think it was, a huge inflection point in anybody's life, obviously. But um, and then again, she made it another 5 years. And I remember she went out to California for a medical school reunion. And when she had come back, she was complaining of having some neck pain. And again, she told me that everything was okay. And it was around Thanksgiving of 1994 that she had to go to the hospital, that she had a lesion in her lung. And it was exactly Thanksgiving Eve that we were in the hospital.
Mm.
And from then, it affected her brain. And within 2 months of that time, in January of 1995, is when she passed. So it
Mm.
was really quick, that last time.
At
And
that last little bit,
yeah,
yeah. But I mean,
yeah.
in general, this was a 10-year process. This was just something that had been going on for 10 years. It was just that last bit that was the hardest to watch, probably.
Oh, yeah. It was the hardest and also the easiest in some sense because it happened so quickly. Because I watched her go from this incredibly vibrant, like, she was unstoppable. There was nothing she couldn't do. And even in the hospital, as she was recovering at that last 10-year mark, people were amazed. Like, she was done up in makeup and perfectly coiffed and dressed to the nines.
Mm.
Um, Yet she was really struggling inside. And I think because it happened so quickly, it was a more peaceful passing. She passed at home with myself there at her side, and a lot of our family friends. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely hard but easy because it was faster than some people will go through that last stages. So
Mhm. Was your brother there as well?
yeah, he was about to turn 16, and he was in his
Mhm.
room at that
Mhm.
time. And I think, as most boys do, he internalized a lot of it. So we dealt with our grief quite differently.
Mhm.
I was much more vocal, he was much more closed about it. And that continues to this day, now almost more than 25 years later.
Yeah, it's
So,
something that it's interesting. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you.
no, that's
And
fine.
it's such a good point that you bring up is that you both lost your mom, yet at the same time, the process of grief is just different based on the age you each were, your personalities. I mean, having that, I'm one of four children, and our sister passed away, and then how each of us dealt with her passing, and then afterwards when our mom passed away, how each of us dealt with that was very different. It was based on our own life experience and our own personalities and our own perceptions of life. So the same loss can affect people differently, and that is very good point that you bring up. So sorry, go ahead. You were saying, so he was
He was
in
in
you
his
were.
room at that
Mhm.
time, and then he came out, obviously, and my dad was working. And that's kind of how it's symbolic of just how we all were and how we dealt with things. I
Mhm.
kind of was front and center trying to process. My dad struggled deeply, obviously, but work was how he
Coped.
handled his grief. And
Mhm.
my brother, you know, also in his own way, struggled, and he loved her deeply, but it was harder for him to face it the way. So I think it was all just meant symbolically, just meant to happen the way it was supposed to happen.
Mhm. Now, do you recall a little bit of that day, just when the transition happened? Um, do you, when you think back in that moment, do you see it like as if it's a movie? Do you remember the details? Do you remember the emotions, or do you see yourself as this um, person, as if you're watching a movie? Yeah, like if you're like
Um,
trying to say, I'm saying personaje. I'm saying
yeah.
a word in Spanish in my head, but that
Uh-huh.
a
No,
character in a movie.
yeah,
That
no,
how do you remember that?
I do remember being there and, the emotion of it. The day before or the day of, I can't recall, she had lost her ability to speak. Her vocal cords had become paralyzed. She became paralyzed initially, from the brain involvement, and but she was able to still speak. But then the day before, the day of, she actually lost her voice, and one of her partners in the OB practice had told everybody to come by because he had felt like this was the sign. Um,
Mm,
so I guess it was probably better. I'm getting emotional
mm.
that
It's okay.
she wasn't able to speak because I could only imagine it would be much harder. But she kind of just looked at me and just took her last breath.
Val, thank you
Yes.
for being just so open and sharing that moment. And for people listening, and the fact, again, this was 1995, I want you all to know, and just like Val said, grief is a journey. There's no beginning or end. And all these moments that we have in our lives, in which when we think of our loved ones, either in happy occasions or when we're thinking of the moments of their passing or anything like that, there can still be emotions that are attached to that, and for everybody is different, and it is normal, and that is again why this podcast is so important, because we need to normalize this conversation and people to feel that it's okay to feel the way they do, and that grief shouldn't be shunned upon. It's a normal emotion, and I'm so grateful that you shared about that moment
Oh, thank you,
with
Kendra.
your
This
mom,
caught me by
honey.
surprise. I didn't think I would be.
You see, that's the thing. That is exactly how grief is. It is just these waves. You don't know when a large wave is going to come and just like bring you, down.
Right,
Sometimes you're just there, relaxing in the ocean, and then all of a sudden, whoopum, the
right.
tide just rises. So it is unexpected, and thank you again for sharing that. I want to talk a little bit about your mom's character, because just even how she um, was able to manage still working even though she was going through all this huge amount of change for 10 years of her life, and having a 6-year-old son when she was diagnosed and a 12-year-old daughter. I can't even imagine how she felt. I mean, we both have kids and that ages, and so just to even fathom that idea is scary.
Hmm.
um, and so tell me a little bit about her history. Your mom, you mentioned she went to school, I guess, in California. If her reunion was there,
No,
that's where
no, no.
she
She
went to school.
actually,
Oh,
we're Persian, so we immigrated to the States when I was an infant. So my parents both went to med school back
in
home
Iran.
in Iran.
In Iran.
Hmm.
Oh, and so the reunion that they had in California with friends from Iran that they
Yeah,
graduated from college.
yeah, a lot of them had
Oh,
emigrated to California and different parts
yeah,
of the
I lived
States.
there. I
Yeah,
called it Tehrangeles, my dear.
exactly.
Tehrangeles. I
So
lived in
yeah,
Tehrangeles.
so that's
That's
where
why I know a little bit of Farsi.
yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
that's where the reunion was, and
oh, okay.
so her character, she was just exceptional. There was nothing that she couldn't do. She was a female OBGYN in a kind of a male
Mail run.
run world at that time, especially. She was amazing and brilliant. She was a fantastic surgeon. She was a gift to her patients. And I just remember her funeral being filled with
Mm,
so many people. And one particular one stands out. It was the last delivery she had been involved in, the last baby she had delivered. And they came.
mm,
And so she worked through it all. And what I remember most about her time in those 10 years was that she really decided to live her life full on. And it's sad that it had to take something, and it always does for most people, um,
mm,
something so tragic to make you live full on. So when she was 35, when she was first diagnosed, she decided she was going to ride a bike. It was her first experience, and she had a 10 speed. So you could like imagine my dad and I and my brother trying to like, hold on to her, and she would fall down and scrape her knee, and she never quit. She just would always get back up. She would bruise herself, black eye, like go to work like that. And then she decided, I'm going to learn how to ski at 40. Okay. She was so brave. And within a year or two, she was black diamonds all the way. Like she actually even,
What?
yeah, I never would
Oh,
go on those trails with her. And she said one time she literally almost fell off a cliff, but it didn't stop her. Like she was just, and when she would fall, the biggest thing she would worry about, because at that time it was post chemo, that when she had her
mm-hmm.
second recurrence, she had chemo, and she was like afraid that her wig would fall off, so she was holding on to her wig as she would like come off her
Oh
skis.
my.
And but I mean, she worked through, I mean, obviously there were times she couldn't work, for brief moments, but through it all she worked. She pursued her passion. She just lived really, she traveled so much with not just my dad alone, but with us as a family. We traveled so much, and I think that she knew that her time was limited. So, 2 years before she passed, she had made this amazing portrait of herself that is hanging in my house, that I'm so lucky to have. Now my kids are able to know who their grandmother, what she physically looked like beyond just pictures. It's this amazing regal picture of her. She rented this gorgeous dress, and a friend of hers had painted it from a picture. And she was just amazing. She really was amazing. I always say this, that I don't know if you ever watched MacGyver, that show with
Oh yeah,
Richard Dean Anderson,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely, girl.
You know how he would take like
We all would pretend to be MacGyvers. I mean, I'm just, I'm close to your age, so I'm like, yeah, I know exactly. So, was
so
she a
he
MacGyver?
she well, in the sense that like she would, he would have like a piece of bubble gum and a rubber
Yeah.
band,
Oh
and he
yeah.
could make
Make
like
anything out of
he
it.
could
Yeah.
make a rocket ship out of it. So she would do that with like anything. Like we'd come home, and she was an exceptional cook. So she cooked, and she was a seamstress. She was always working out. She was eating as clean as possible. She loved wine. She was a wine connoisseur. She got my dad really into it. So they built a wine cellar. She was just amazing. She had so many talents and so many gifts. And it was just like always unveiling it to me was just so amazing.
Mm.
And she never sat still. She was always doing something. And I think she just was in a hurry to live life. And she knew that it was limited, as we all do, I guess,
Exactly.
ultimately,
We
right?
all do. We all, I mean, we know that that is, or we are going to die and we don't know the when. Yet at the same time, why is it that for some of us, it takes those, eye-opening moments in life like that, scary sometimes moments to just start living,
Mm-hmm.
it is sad that we have to wait for those moments to really start living. But she
Exactly.
really made the best out of those years. And for you to see how she lived, what a great example for you and your brother to
Yep.
see that grit and perseverance, tenacity. I
Yep.
mean, I'm just, those are just some of the words that come to mind just from what you've shared. And the not afraid to learn new things when we're, older, the falling, the fact that she learned to ride a bike at, starting at 35, and all these different things that she did, the skiing, it's amazing. What an
Mm-hmm.
amazing woman. I can see even more now, though, why it is you are the woman you are, my dear.
Oh, thank you. You're too
Yeah.
kind.
Oh, no, I'm just being truthful. I'm being honest. Love, how was it for you, Val, to then you were mentioning, of course, finding out when you were 12 about her diagnosis, and then when she passed at 12, at 20, when you were 22, what were some of the tools that you used in order to help you in your grieving process, or your or your mourning process? I heard the difference between mourning and grieving. Mourning are the things we do in order to
Mm-hmm.
help us grieve. So whether it's journaling or singing or walking in nature or planting a tree in honor of somebody, things like that. And grieving is just those moments in which it just kind of, it just happens, like what even just happened in this conversation. So,
Right.
what were some of the things you helped in your journey
Gosh,
that
I didn't
helped you?
really have many tools in my toolbox, Kendra,
Mm,
like I do now. So mourning for me was just like eating. I had a terrible
mm.
relationship with food, and because I couldn't control my experience with what were
Was
her
happening,
experience, yeah,
yes,
I was
around you.
controlling
Hmm.
what I ate, and I developed some OCDs around things in
Mm,
my life. Like if I was doing something like a homework and I thought of my mom's illness, I would like rip it up and start over because I was like, I can't put that thought, that negative thought. It was
oh,
really,
wow.
yeah, it was very paralyzing in some ways. So the OCDs, and I didn't have the tools about, I didn't know about journaling, and I didn't really
Mhm.
understand gratitude. I was just very much drowning in that lack of control that I had. So it was really hard to give you anything that I did that was productive for
That
me.
was helpful. How
Yeah.
about in terms of your beliefs? What were your family, if you're okay with sharing that, what was your family's belief about death? Because sometimes that also has an impact of how we deal with a death. Do you remember it being something you guys talked
No,
about in your
no,
family?
we never did. We kind of just brushed things like that under the
Mhm.
table. We didn't really have, we weren't religious. I mean, I know that my parents believed in God, and I do too. And I'm very, very spiritual, and I pray all the time now. But, and I know my
Mhm.
dad was always doing that, but like we didn't have any connection to religion, to be quite honest. So I don't
Mhm.
remember having any sort of understanding about the life after death and whatnot. Um,
Mhm.
so it was not, I didn't feel like it was at all, it was very dysfunctional for me the way that I handled it because it was the only way I knew how.
Well, that is, yeah,
Um,
that is what you knew. So it's not, I mean, that is what it was. So we can't control what it was, right? That was
right.
just what it is. So then what then that was in your 20s.
Hmm.
Um, kind of when did like the journey of kind of trying to either was it personal growth? What were some of then the things that you started to pick up along the way to help you
To mourn or to
to
grieve.
yeah,
Well, I just,
or did you just kind of happen just
it was,
happen on its own? Mhm.
you know, I guess maybe my, now looking back, my only sense that I can have of how I handled it was always talking about her, was just always
Oh, that is
talking
perfect.
about her. And, you
Mhm,
know, not until I joined the health and wellness company that you and I are both a part of did I really develop any skills about personal development or mindset. Um,
mm.
I really didn't have any tools whatsoever. So for me at the time, I was just talking about her all the time. Really, that was it.
And you know what? That is a great way of remembering somebody that's passed is by sharing stories and keeping their memory alive in that way. So that is one of your method. That was one of your methods. So aside
Hmm.
from the OCDness that was developed as a side, effect, I guess, from what you had experienced, um, than the way that you really healed in, I mean, it's you're constantly healing. It's again, it's not a fixing. We're not trying to
Exactly.
fix. It's not a fixing. There's nothing to fix. Grief is not
Right.
about fixing anything.
Right.
Um, but it's about just being able to live with it in a way that it's healthier and manageable in our lives, that we're not hurting ourselves or hurting those around us. And so by talking about her, I'm sure that that really helped. Now, was that something that others in your family also would do? Like, would you sit around and be like, "Oh, remember when mom
No,
did the
not
skiing down
real.
the hill and her wig would fall off and she'd put it back on?" Humor for me is one of my ways.
Oh,
Like,
me
so
too.
when you
Yeah.
said that the image of her, oh my gosh, I'm more worried about my
Right,
wig.
right. No, I don't think we really did that as a family. Again, like after my mom died, my dad did take my brother and myself to a psychiatrist to sit down and talk, and it was just the only one time we ever did that together. But I
Mhm.
don't know. I mean, I guess I just talked about it with my friends at the time. I really don't recall having family discussions. And, initially it was kind of, again, I was in med school. I was kind of just focusing on that and really working hard. And, the friends that I had at the time, I would talk about the loss, but it wasn't something that I remember as a family sitting and reminiscing. Although we did, have some videos and things that we
Yeah,
would
I was gonna
watch, which
that's
are
what I was
just
gonna say.
treasures. Yeah, but
That yeah, that is wonderful.
yeah, so I don't remember it being anything more than that for me. And
Did you have other family in the States, when they moved from
oh
Iran?
yeah,
Did other family members
oh
did
yeah,
they
we
live
had.
in New York area too? In the New
Well,
York area?
my aunt, my dad's sister, she's a huge part of our life. She was like
Mhm.
kind of the matriarch of our family at the time when we came here. She had come here first, like brave. She's also a physician, a cardiologist, since retired, and she took us in. So we lived with her for so many years. And so when at the time we were not my we know we had our own home for several years, but after my
'Cause
mom
you were
died.
born in Iran. You were
Yeah,
born in
yeah,
Iran as
yeah,
well. Yeah, so
yeah.
you were how old when you guys,
I was like an
immigrated?
infant, maybe a
You
year, maybe
Oh,
less,
okay,
maybe
really young.
maybe
Okay.
between 1 and 2. But
Okay.
we then moved in with my aunt for a time being because my dad could not live in that house anymore because that's where my
Mm.
mom died and there were too many memories. So we sold that house. We lived with her for a bit. My dad bought another house not far away from that. So yeah, we always had my aunt, and I have another aunt who lives in Jersey, but it was really that aunt that we had kind of lived with for so long. So she was a big part of that for me.
Did she
Um,
become somebody that you would reach out to later on in your life? Because then there's a whole bunch of other life-changing moments that came, graduating from college, marrying, having children. Is she is she the person that you would call, or is it your dad? Who do you have that relationship and bond with?
yeah,
Um,
so it's funny because my mom's death was really the catalyst for strengthening my relationship with my dad. So he was
mhm,
kind of somebody that I started to develop a really incredible relationship with after the death of my mom. He worked
mm,
so hard all of our lives. They both did. So, but it was the first time that I got to really know him, um, and understand who he was. And he is one of my very best friends, aside from my
mm.
husband, but it took that event to bring us closer. And, but it's interesting because my dad has had a brother who lived mostly in Iran. He would come visit, and he became somebody that I connected with. He uh, really was an amazing spiritual man, and so he believed in Sufism, which is a mystical sect. I don't know if
Mhm,
you've ever heard of it. Yeah, so
mhm.
he taught me about death before dying. Live your life as if you were dying, so that while you're still alive. And I forged an incredible bond with him. And then my mom had a partner in her practice that she was very good friends with, and his wife is one of my dearest reminders of my mom. So she was there when my
Mm,
mom died in the room, and she had asked my mom to watch over us. And she has always been that for me. She's come to the birth of
mm,
all of my kids, no matter what time of day, no matter how bad she was feeling. She had a really bad back issues, and she showed up in the delivery room with my dad and my husband there, of course. And
mm.
so she was really a very big constant and still is in my life. And I'm hoping she will listen to this podcast. But
Oh.
there was a lot of people. It takes a village. You can't do it alone. And sometimes they come in unexpected people.
Mhm.
So yeah, I never expected my uncle that I saw maybe a few months out of the year to ever be that for me. But he was a huge part of that part of my life in college. And then um, when she was still alive, but I struggled with all of that what was going on. And then through med school and beyond, you know, it just became the people like you that I meet that
Mm,
big part of your circle, that you realize how much of a common thread you all have with people.
mhm.
So
Yeah, so people talking about her, um, and keeping her memory alive by, also looking at pictures and videos. So those were really your tools. Your tools were really relying and learning and leaning on these people in your life, that became your somewhat of your mentors, right? And
yeah,
your
yeah,
guides
because
in this.
Yeah, I would tell, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I would
No.
ask Lois, my mom's really good friend, tell me some
Mhm.
stories about my mom when you guys used to all hang out as adults,
Mm.
because the kids weren't involved. And then when I had all three of my children, I didn't live anywhere near the hospital that she worked at, but it was always my dream that she would deliver my babies. Um, I
Mm.
wasn't that far. I mean, I was probably an hour plus away, which isn't really the safest thing to do is, try to deliver so far away. But each time I would go out to Long Island to give birth in the hospital, and they had this gorgeous quilt that they made in her honor with her picture right in the middle of it. It was like life's, it was the size of an entire wall. And the nurses that
Mm.
were there, I didn't know them that well, but one of them came up to me. She goes, "It's an honor to just even be in this room with you because of how much I loved your mom." And so it was really special. And all her partners delivered my three of my kids. So each partner delivered them. And it was
I'm
the way
crying on this end.
through.
Oh my gosh. Just to think that your daughters were born in the place that your mom worked, and that
Hmm.
that was her work was a huge part of her life, and how she also handled all those years that she was, living with cancer, and being able to be there, and even the part where you shared how one of the last, the family that she had last delivered for was also at the funeral. Like, all those
Right.
kind of moments just brought me so much, and so for you to give birth at the hospital, because I was actually going to ask you that too, is how is it for you as a mom to be raising three girls, and and not having her, like, in, some, having her, do you call Lewis, do you call,
Lois.
who did,
Yeah.
yeah, Lois, yeah, who is your person, and how did you notice another level of grief to some extent after you became a mom?
Oh, 1,000%. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was so hard to be a motherless mom. And
Yeah.
so what's interesting is I have a very dear friend that I only met from our kids being in school together. And that was maybe about less than 5 years ago. So she's so similar to me. She lost her mother to breast cancer at a young age. We are very neurotic about like clean eating. Like we're insanely similar that way. We have so many similarities in our own personal characteristics in other ways. And she's somebody that I really heavily rely on for that. But my dad was fortunate enough to meet and marry a lovely lady, Donna, who, when I had my kids, was one of my saving graces. I mean, she
Mm.
really stepped in and she was part of my village. And then my mother in law, who I adore, I'm so lucky. She was also and still is, they both continue to be a huge, huge part of that um, support system for me after becoming a mom. And I I don't know how I would have done it without their help. And
Mhm.
then when my oldest was born, we had an incredible, wonderful nanny that helped us. And she was like the baby of 12 kids, never had her own kids, but she probably taught me more about motherhood
Mm.
than anyone. Um,
Even though she
not
was the youngest, even though she was
she
the
was the
youngest of
oldest. She was
12?
the, oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
she was
She
the
was the
oldest.
oldest. I
So, oh,
apologize.
the
She was the
oldest.
oldest.
So
Yeah.
she raised all her siblings. Yeah,
Yes, practically.
basically.
And
Mhm.
she just, having my babies was the biggest gift of my life, yet it was so hard, not
Yeah.
being able to ask my mom, well, did I do this when I was little, or how do I handle
Mhm.
this, or what did you do? It was really hard because there was nobody that could answer that question in her place.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a whole level all over again, just like you said. It was
Of
just
grief coming up.
opening
Mhm.
up. Yep, 1,000%.
Yeah, and there's also the emotions that come from becoming a mom are just so much more heightened, right? When we become
Oh,
moms anyway,
yes.
everything is just so much like, like, there were certain TV shows I couldn't watch anymore because I'd, like, be
Oh my God.
bawling, right?
Yes,
Because it's like
yes.
your emotions are just out there,
Oh
you
yeah.
feel for everybody. Yeah, it is just, there's this empathy that, even if we're normally, empathetic anyway, like, it just becomes even bigger when you become a mom. And so, aside from that, then you also had the component of the grief side also kind of coming to the surface. of this new experience of motherhood, and having to do it without your
Mm-hmm.
mom physically by your side. Because again, I just, that visual of you in that hospital, and that you mentioned about the quilt with her picture on it and everybody being there, I in my perspective, there is no doubt in my mind, in my viewpoint, which is that she was there. So
Oh yeah, 100%. No
yeah,
question. No
so
question.
that is a given for sure, and that's just such a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Aw.
Do you talk about her to the
Oh my
girls? Do
gosh,
you
all the
share
time.
stories?
All the
Oh,
time. Yeah, and
so
kids
it
love that, in general, but
yes.
yeah, all the time.
I
All
I
the
I
time.
I find that I mean, my kids got to meet my mom, but they never met my sister because my sister died when I was 21. And so that I always say, Tia Soris, which is Aunt Soris was her nickname. So it's like Tia Soris, da, 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 Tia Soris, and that. Like, I'm constantly, just like how you said you would talk about your mom, I'm constantly bringing up her name to my kids all their life. And so
Yes.
they feel like they know my sister even though they never met her, so I believe, at least, that it's a big part of an important part to be able to pass on those memories of our loved ones to these other generations, um, because they make part of who we are
A
too.
100%. And it
Yeah.
teaches them about how to, like, I'm such a believer, and I put this on my social media post recently, about just breaking the cycle of generations, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
my mom, she was amazing, and she tried to wear a million hats, and she still struggled internally, and just kind of put herself last, and had her demons that, she didn't probably kind of evaluate. And then I developed my own, not through any fault of anyone's, but just the process of life and my journey. And I learned the tools, about personal development and mindset work. And then I try to be evolving, and so that my children will eventually break that cycle. They will be the
Yes.
generation that breaks that cycle. So to me, that is so critical, because we don't talk about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my mom's generation and her friends, they don't talk about the pain that they go through of general life, and what the expectations of society are on them, and what they have to live up to. And they don't realize, how important it is to be
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable, and to talk, and to be open. And so it's so taboo, right? You're not allowed to tell people that you're
Mm-hmm.
sad about something, or
Oh,
that,
no. And that's
right?
why even hiding, even sometimes even an illness, there were probably, I don't know if there were some of her close friends that might have not known for a long time that she was even sick.
Well,
Were there anybody?
she didn't tell her
Patients. Okay.
mom, she didn't tell her own mother and her
Oh my
brother.
gosh.
Yeah, and then so for them that was a terrific blow, because
Wow.
she was trying to protect them, right? Because she was always trying to be the one that protected everybody else, and in the end,
Mm.
it was a
Hard on
beautiful
them because
part
they
of,
never,
yeah. But it was
yeah,
a
because they didn't
beautiful,
get to,
it was her
mhm.
way of being a beautifully kind, loving daughter, sister,
Right.
mother. But it really, we have to be
Affected their own process.
honest.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of times what we think we're doing in order to protect those around us to not suffer can sometimes end up making them suffer more at the end. I am a big believer in just sharing things in the moment and not hiding things, because um it, I at least I think that finding out right when it would happen and not having that process of grieving through the process of somebody, for example, being sick, makes it so much harder.
Oh my
uh
goodness. Yeah.
it's as if it had been like a sudden death, rather, it really, because you're just finding out that in that way. So but again, taking back to that, it goes back to what you were mentioning. Your mom was doing it out of love. Your mom was
Oh
not,
yes.
the reason she chose to do that was based out of love, and it was based on her upbringing and um her way of, also, of maybe culturally what she had grown up seeing, and how, that is just how it is. So it's up to us to then, like you said, break cycles that can bring more harm than good. It's just kind of
Yes.
break those for our next generations. um I wanted to also ask you, you mentioned again about the personal growth and development. And so how is that now? Like, how did that kind of start playing a part? You mentioned you started implementing that after you joined our health and wellness company. And
Hmm.
how did that kind of come into your life? And what is it that you see now that has been a big shift for you?
So I mean, I just learned about the importance of just daily gratitude, right? So,
Mm,
even going through what's happening now with COVID-19, just being able to live in gratitude that, we are blessed because we are together as a family more now than ever. And just being grateful for, and I used to say this before I learned the personal development, some people would ever have a mom like my mom was for me, but yet I had the privilege of at least having her for 22 years of my life. So just
mhm.
being grateful for that, and grateful that my dad and I have a strengthened relationship, and
Yeah, close
grateful.
relation. That would have
Yeah.
probably not happened, that relationship.
No,
That's one of the things that I
no.
noticed the most in our family dynamics of how much it changed when one piece of that puzzle was not there, how it completely made the shift in the inner relations. I would not have the
Uh-huh.
relationship I have with my brother and my sister. I guarantee it. Had my sisters or Anna still, it would be different. It would be, I would have a relation. It would just be different.
It would be different.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow. Okay. So then gratefulness, creating that
Gratitude, yeah.
attitude of
And then
gratitude. Mhm.
just knowing that anything you want to create in your life is by your design. So
Mhm.
just understanding that I don't have to be um, worried about my destiny with health. And on the flip side of it, for me, also beside the mindset work, was just throwing myself into the world of healing on a level different than I was trained conventionally in medical school, but more about how we are not destined to live out the genes that we may have, and that there is a science called epigenetics, meaning above the gene, and that our lifestyle, our nutrition, our the people we surround ourselves with, our community, our thoughts, are all tied into that. And so, because of this company of ours that we're both in, I was able to connect with mindset leaders and thought leaders, and um, just be able to open like the channels of neuroplasticity, right? Just to be able to make new synapses, to know that I can have control over the things that are a part of my life, that I am in the driver's seat. And then ultimately, for me, it's always been about passing that torch to my daughters, sometimes prematurely, because everyone has always told me, rightfully so, that you got to start with you, Val. You got to learn
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
before you teach them. But they're always in that center of my universe. So teaching them and learning has become like such a huge part of my life, because of partly because of this company and all the people I've met through it and the community. So that's really what I have now to be a tool in my toolbox, and how
Yeah,
lucky I feel for that.
I know. And I feel like we always say this, but it's the company we're part of. It's like it's a personal growth and development company disguised as a health and wellness company.
Right, exactly. But that's what health and wellness is, right? It's all
It
about
really is.
personal growth.
Well,
You
yeah,
never stop.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and health and wellness is not it's about our mind, our body, our soul. It's more than just our body. It's our,
Yes.
our mind and our emotions and yeah, how we think, how we feel, and then all the human experiences we have, those interactions. I something came up as you were saying, and it's really interesting to see that aspect of control, how when your mom passed away, you
Hmm.
thought since you didn't have control over her passing, then you were controlling then what you could control, which was food, and in that case you were using it as comfort. And
Hmm.
now how all of us, all after your journey, now to see and in your journey how the control of health component of how we choose to eat has that effect in our health, and that
Hmm.
that is some aspect that we have in control. And I always tell this to my kids too, it's that we can only do what we can. So I'm like, I can't guarantee that because I'm eating organic or because I'm eating X, Y, and Z and this and that I'm going to be healthy for the rest. I can't guarantee that. I can't, but I am doing what's in my control
Right.
to live the healthiest life I can, and
Exactly.
hoping that if food, food being medicine, that at least I am, doing the right thing. And I is that I want to then now talk a little bit about how you now practice your being a dermatologist, and now that you have this aspect of health and wellness in your background, how do you then merge these two, and how do you inspire your patients?
So I believe in my heart of hearts that there is no compartmentalization of health. So, yes, I specialize in dermatology because growing up, I had terrible acne and I can totally relate. And I love the field for so many reasons, especially because it allows me flexibility in my schedule to be just working part time so I could be home with my girls. But truly, it's not a compartmentalized thing, health and wellness. It's all integrative. And that's why I pursued a fellowship in integrative medicine that I just completed in February.
Mm,
But so I practice it just authentically in my office that when somebody comes with a skin issue, it's really just a story of something
mm,
internally that's going on. And we kind of unfold that in the office and um, really try to connect the dots the best we can to understand that we can use the marriage of Western and Eastern medicine to really kind of get great results, but more importantly, how powerful they are. And they don't need to relinquish that power to a physician or an external source, that they can find those answers. And one of the greatest tools I learned from a mindset coach is that power. And I started to read about Dr. Joseph Dispenza and his
mm-hmm,
work and how neuroscience and quantum physics have so much to do. Like our nervous system is our greatest pharmacy, right? Like you hear about the placebo effect when somebody has a sugar pill and they don't know it,
mm-hmm.
and then all their symptoms go away, right? Like that just
Yeah,
means that our bodies
mind, yeah.
can heal, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we
Because it starts
intrinsic,
with the part of with the mind, with the fact
right?
that the people think they are, and then yeah, you
Yeah. So
think it,
it,
you make it. Yeah. What's that
right.
saying? You
You,
think
you
what you
think,
think you.
I know the saying, if you change
Yeah.
your thoughts, you change your world or
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
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 Something.
Something like yeah.
So for me, like the power of our own bodies that want to intrinsically walk towards health, it's a really exceptional thing. Um, and yes, it's frustrating because it doesn't happen overnight. And neither did my journey. And I'm not even done. But every day I try to just be a little bit better than I was, just a little bit, even with my nutrition, even with my mindset that I'm working so hard on. Meditation is something I'm really trying to focus on, and it's not easy for this crazy busy
Mm.
mind to be like
Oh, no,
sitting
no, no.
still.
Oh, that's me. That's me. For me, my meditation is just even walking my dog. Like even in, walking my dog in silence is my meditation. Or if I
Yeah.
stand on the grass barefoot is my meditation. Prayer is a big part of my life.
Yes,
Uh,
I do that a
but
lot. Yep.
yeah, but it's interesting. Meditation, I find it hard as well. So I have to be doing something, even the shower, just that running when I'm showering, it's like all these amazing thoughts come in my mind, it's like, it's like in this
Yes.
peaceful. So what are some of the things that you have found for meditation that work for our busy type of minds that we
I'm still
have?
searching, girlfriend. I don't know. I just started to do the last 3 days. Bob Proctor has a abundance meditation,
Uh-huh.
so I've been doing that. Really, it's the most consistent I've ever done anything for the last 3 days, which is like a big deal.
That's
And
wonderful.
um, I guess just prayer. Like that's something I
Mhm.
do every day with my kids in the morning, at night, during the day.
Mhm.
If I'm finding myself like reeling out of control with anxiety for whatever reason. So yeah, I that for me has worked, and we'll see. I'm always open to learning new things about how to calm my mind.
Mm. Well, you've just shared so much, Val, and I know everybody listening is going to have gone on this emotional ride with us. I hope, and be able to also take a whole bunch of nuggets of experience and tips along the way of what they can do in their life. And if anything, when they were listening, to kind of feel that comfort of knowing that if they've got those waves that have come in the middle of their day or in a conversation like we had even in this one, that is absolutely normal. And that is a huge gift, I think, for when someone else can feel connected to another person's story and be able to heal themselves. So thank you so much for sharing all of this. And now, Val, before we close off, how can people get in touch with you if they want to find out a little bit more of even just how you practice your medicine and now
Oh,
yeah, or
yeah.
how
Well,
what's the
my
best way
husband,
to find you?
yeah, my husband and I are creating a vision board of our future practice together online. But for now, we don't have that.
Ooh, love
So
it.
you
You
can
see the
always,
time that you're using during this quarantine of creating this amazing vision board of your practice.
yeah.
Awesome.
So they can find me through my Facebook page, which is Valerie Knows That. It is a private page, but if you
Okay,
know, they
that's
can
fine.
always send me a message. And I do have a practice in the Orange County area of New York, so
Oh, I
they
didn't even
can.
know there was an Orange County in New York.
Yeah, there is.
Since being that I lived in California, I always think of Orange County,
I
California.
know,
It's
right?
like,
It's
oh.
not the same. It's not the same. Yeah.
So
Um,
I'll put whatever information you give me I can that you'd like public, I can
yeah,
share
I'll
it in
just
the
put my
show
social.
notes.
Yeah,
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 no,
you can share my Instagram and my Facebook page. That's probably the easiest
perfect.
way for people to
Perfect. I'll
reach
put
me.
that in the show notes so that if people want to reach out and see how they can see you either in person or just even follow and be inspired, they can do so. And
Oh,
I'm
I
just
would
so
love that. I'm ready.
grateful.
I want to impact anybody I can, Kendra. And thank you
Oh, well,
so
right now with
much.
this call, you did already, my dear, as well.
Thank you.
You just did by with this call. I say call, this podcast. It is a call / recorded to become a podcast. So, um, thank you so much again, Val. I love you. And thanks for
I love you
sharing
dearly. Thank you for
all
all you
your
do, Kendra.
story.
You're a gift. A gift. You
Oh,
are.
I told this to Kim in the last interview, and you know who I'm talking about, Kim, since
Yes.
she's your friend as well. But she just started to say that. I'm like, no, this is not about me. This is not my podcast. It's about you. It's your. So
Oh,
I say the same here. I'm so grateful. Love you, dear.
love you
Thanks
too,
again,
Kendra. Okay, bye
and
now.
thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.